Today's video is on the top 5 most dangerous cars ever made.
Number 5. Holden Commodore. Holden began producing the rear-wheel drive Commodore in Australia in 1978, and while the more recent models were, of course, built with strict safety standards in mind, the original versions didn't stand up so well in the face of an accident. This didn't stop it from becoming one of General Motors' best-selling models, though, and updated designs are still in production today. A crash test conducted in 1992 shows virtually the entire car crumpling against a wall when traveling around 60 miles per hour and really puts modern designs into perspective. Only the trunk survives in any recognizable form, and even though this test was set up with a heavy payload and a solid wall, it's what drivers could expect if tragedy struck on the highway. There would simply be no way for a driver or any of their passengers to survive destruction like this, and their best bet was to buy a totally different car in the first place. Number 4. Fiat Seicento. The Fiat Seicento entered production at the end of 1997 and was the Italian company's replacement for the popular Cinquecento. With a name meaning 600, more than 1.1 million were produced in Poland up until 2004 when it was discontinued. One of the main reasons why they ceased production was because of its poor safety record. It achieved only a 1.5-star rating from its Euro NCAP crash tests, the European equivalent of the NHTSA tests, which made it one of the worst ever to be looked at. Video of the tests show the crash dummies experiencing a traumatic ride as the car crumples around them. You'd be incredibly lucky to walk away from an incident like that. The main reason for this terrible performance is because of the short front end and the reliance on so many design choices from the model it replaced. It wasn't a modern car for a modern age and failed to bring in safety features that were becoming standard at the time. Number 3. DeLorean DMC12. It's one of the most famous cars ever thanks to its leading role in the Back to the Future franchise. But beyond being able to travel in time, the DeLorean was verging on being a death trap. One of the early names for the car was, somewhat comically, the DeLorean Safety Vehicle. But even with the lesser safety standards in the 80s, this was a stretch. 4 DeLoreans were sent to the NHTSA for crash tests, and even though they passed with the report saying that the car's interior dimensions remained quite generous following an impact at 40 miles per hour, the stainless steel still crumpled under pressure. However, it was in real-life uses that the DeLorean showed its true danger, and most of this was due to the design of its doors. Known as gull wings, they were hinged at the roof instead of at the sides, and so opened up. While this might look incredibly cool, the DeLorean's use of these doors, in particular, posed a problem. If the car was in an accident that damaged the sides or it flipped onto its roof, there was no way for the driver or passengers to get out. While it's one of the last cars you would ever be driving on the road, it's still undoubtedly the only car in the world that everyone has wanted to drive at 88 miles per hour. Number 2. Rise above the rest. With shows like Pimp My Ride, the desire for people to customize their rides is greater than ever. Whether it's TV screens, audio equipment, or even fish tanks, there are modifications you can do to keep your car street legal. But there's also plenty of other things you can do that might make your ride look awesome, but makes it completely unsafe for use in public. There's a reason why there are strict limits on what can be on the road, and this SUV, known as the Hum Rider, is one of them. It was made as a marketing tool to promote a roadside assistance service, and as a one-off was never properly driven, which is a good thing. The main body of this high rider is a Jeep Cherokee, but hydraulic lifts have been built into its wheelbase. In total, it weighs over 8,400 pounds, which is double the weight of a standard Jeep Cherokee. And it's able to lift itself up using 300 feet of hydraulic lines and a single gas Honda generator that puts almost 900 pounds of pressure through those pipes to raise the body more than 9 feet into the air. Needless to say, the maneuverability is virtually non-existent, but that hardly matters when you're able to simply drive over all the other road users. Parking would never be a problem either, but with all the added weight, this car comes with some serious safety issues. It obviously can't reach too high of a top speed, but even at a cruising pace, this beast would be destructive if it was involved in a crash. The framework simply wouldn't be able to handle the pressures going through it, and the addition of a gas generator poses a major fire hazard. As a demonstration vehicle to show what's possible, it's great, but anything further than that, you'd be better off with virtually anything else. Number 1. Ford Pinto. Car manufacturers try to design their vehicles in the safest way possible, and usually, if they notice a defect, then they'll work to correct it. The story of the Ford Pinto, though, is one where corporate interests kept a serious design flaw secret for a number of years, which risked the lives of everyone who drove one. The problem with the Pinto was the design of its fuel system, which saw the fuel tank being positioned between the rear axle and the rear bumper. While this was standard practice in the early 70s, the combination of this position and the build quality of the tanks made it incredibly dangerous. They were prone to leak, and the lack of rear reinforcement and an essentially ornamental rear bumper meant that if the car suffered a collision from behind, it had a high chance of catching on fire. In 1972, Ford started receiving reports that Pintos were burning out after low-speed rear collisions, but twice investigated the problem and found there to be no issue. Eventually, after 7 years, Ford had to act. The fix for the flaw cost only $11 per car, which, in a report to the government, they calculated would cost $137 million to fix the 12.5 million problematic cars and trucks from all the manufacturers. This, they said, would save 180 burn deaths and 180 serious injuries per year, which they calculated came at the cost to society of $49.5 million. Leaving potential fire traps out on the roads came with consequences for Ford. They were investigated by the NHTSA, who said that the document produced by the company had made it clear that they viewed paying compensation as more profitable than a full recall. In the end, they forced Ford to recall the Pintos in 1978, and the company was forced to fix 1.5 million vehicles, at the time, the largest recall in U.S. automotive history. Honorable mentions. Straight piping. People regularly adapt their cars from the stock version to make them unique. At first, this was to make them hydraulic lowriders or to give them tinted windows, but a recent trend has begun to cause concern for authorities. Known as straight piping, it involves removing a section of the exhaust system and altering the computer that regulates the car fuel combustion. This creates a loud popping sound and flashes of light from the tailpipe, which people frequently mistake for gunfire. The initial worry is that this simulated gunshot would create panic with nearby pedestrians and would cause them to take evasive actions that ultimately put them into harm's way. Rather than simply a loud noise, this method is specifically imitating gunfire and can even fool ShotSpotter, which is a tool that's used by police departments to detect discharge of weapons. Altering crucial systems within a car can also make it unsafe to drive, and interfering with the flow of exhaust from the engine can lead to overheating problems that can, at least, cause the car to fail and, at the worst, overheat and start a fire. Reliant Robin. Produced in various guises by the Reliant Motor Company in England between 1973 and 2002, the Reliant Robin was a three-wheeled car that, with an 850cc engine, could reach speeds of up to 85 miles per hour. The unusual design actually meant that it could be driven with a motorcycle license and had to be registered and taxed as such, which offered owners a significant saving over more traditional designs. The Reliant Robin has always been seen as a comic car, though, and perhaps fittingly, it came with a flaw in its design that was funny anytime it happened. If it was carrying enough weight and going at a high enough speed, then it was prone to flipping over when it turned a corner. While there aren't any records of deaths due to this, people risked becoming trapped inside the car and needed to be helped out. Partly because of the ease at which it could roll over, the Reliant Robin became synonymous with comedy in the UK where it was made, and it was commonly seen being tipped, crashed into, and bumped out of place in episodes of Mr. Bean.
I hope you all enjoyed today's video, narrated by Zach this time. Be sure to subscribe for more and check out some of our recent uploads.